If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Sharing it with your friends and family helps spread knowledge. And when we help others grow, we grow too. Thank you so much for listening. Let's dive into the podcast. Chapter 1: Seeds of Revolution, Garage Dreams and Founder's Fire. Part 1: Humble Origins in Los Altos. The magic began with two young men who shared a passion for electronics and a dream that seemed impossible. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak had been friends since high school, bonding over pranks and their love for technology. By the mid-1970s, both were working in Silicon Valley, but their lives took different paths. Wozniak, or Woz as everyone called him, was the quiet genius working at Hewlett-Packard, designing calculators by day and tinkering with computer circuits by night. Jobs worked at Atari, the video game company, but his restless energy always pushed him toward bigger ideas. The spark that changed everything happened when Woz showed Jobs his latest creation. In his spare time, Woz had built something extraordinary, a computer that could actually work. This wasn't like the massive machines that filled entire rooms at universities. This was small enough to fit on a desk, and it could do things that amazed even Woz himself. When Jobs saw the computer displaying text on a simple television screen, he immediately grasped what Woz couldn't see. This wasn't just a cool gadget for electronics hobbyists. This was the future. Jobs convinced his friend that they should start a company together. They would build and sell these computers to anyone who wanted one. The problem was money. They had almost none. Jobs sold his Volkswagen van, and Woz sold his HP calculator. Together, they scraped up $1,300 to buy parts and start their business. The workspace was Jobs' family garage in Los Altos, California. It wasn't glamorous, but it was free, and they could work there any time of day or night. Woz handled the technical side, carefully soldering circuit boards and writing the software that made everything work. Jobs focused on the business side, thinking about how to make the computer look professional and appeal to customers. They brought in a third partner, Ronald Wayne, who was older and had business experience. Wayne drew the first Apple logo and wrote their partnership agreement. But after just 12 days, Wayne got scared about the financial risks and sold his 10% stake back to Jobs and Wozniak for $800. Years later, that stake would have been worth billions. The Apple I computer they created was revolutionary for its time. Most computers required users to flip switches and read blinking lights to operate them. The Apple I could connect to a regular television and display actual text and numbers on the screen. For electronics enthusiasts who gathered at the Homebrew Computer Club, this was incredible. They had been dreaming of computers that ordinary people could actually use. Jobs and Wozniak started selling their computers for $666.66 each. They built each one by hand in the garage, with Jobs' sister and friends helping assemble the parts. The orders started coming in slowly, but they were enough to prove that people wanted what they were making. The garage in Los Altos became the birthplace of something much bigger than either young man imagined. What started as two friends sharing their love of technology was growing into a real business. The Apple I was just the beginning, and both Jobs and Wozniak could feel that they were on the edge of creating something that would change how people thought about computers forever. Part 2. Enter the Apple II, awakening the home computer age. By early 1977, the success of the Apple I had given Jobs and Wozniak enough confidence to dream bigger. They knew that their hand-built computer had proven there was a market for personal machines, but they also recognized its limitations. The Apple I was still primarily for electronics enthusiasts who didn't mind tinkering with circuit boards and connecting their own keyboards and monitors. If they wanted to reach ordinary people, they needed to create something completely different. Wozniak threw himself into designing what would become the Apple II. His engineering brilliance shone as he solved problem after problem, creating a machine that would be both powerful and simple to use. Unlike the Apple I, this new computer would come in a sleek plastic case with everything built in and ready to work right out of the box. Most importantly, it would display color graphics on a regular television screen, something that seemed almost magical at the time. Jobs pushed for design elements that would make the Apple II appealing to families and businesses, not just hobbyists. He insisted on a clean, professional appearance that would look at home in a living room or office. The result was a beige plastic case that opened easily for expansion, allowing users to add memory and other components as their needs grew. This openness became one of the Apple II's greatest strengths. When the Apple II launched in April 1977, it immediately stood apart from every other personal computer on the market. While competitors required users to assemble kits or work with complicated commands, the Apple II simply worked. People could take it home, plug it in, and start using it within minutes. The color graphics capability amazed everyone who saw it, making simple games and educational programs come alive on screen. But the real transformation came in 1979 with the arrival of VisiCalc, the world's first spreadsheet program. Created by Dan Bricklin and Bob Frankston, VisiCalc turned the Apple II from an interesting toy into an essential business tool. Suddenly, accountants, small business owners, and financial planners could perform complex calculations and create detailed budgets with unprecedented ease. The program was so powerful that many people bought Apple II computers solely to run VisiCalc. This software partnership demonstrated something revolutionary about the Apple II's open design. By making it easy for other companies to create programs, Apple had created a platform that could grow and evolve. Each new piece of software made the computer more valuable, and each new user created demand for even more applications. The combination of user-friendly hardware and practical software transformed Apple from a garage startup into a major technology company. The Apple II wasn't just a computer. It was the machine that convinced millions of people that personal computers belonged in their homes and offices. This success would fuel Apple's next ambitious leap into an even larger arena of innovation and competition. Part 3. Funding ambitions and expanding horizons. By 1979, Apple's success with the Apple II had attracted attention far beyond California's tech circles. The company's revenue was climbing rapidly, jumping from just over $7 million in 1978 to more than $47 million the following year. This explosive growth caught the eye of venture capitalists and institutional investors who saw Apple as the perfect opportunity to ride the personal computer wave. Mike Markula, who had joined Apple early as both investor and business mentor, knew the company needed serious capital to compete with giants like IBM and Digital Equipment Corporation. The garage days were over. Apple needed professional manufacturing facilities, larger research teams, and a distribution network that could reach customers nationwide. Most importantly, they needed the financial muscle to develop new products while continuing to improve the Apple II. The decision to go public wasn't taken lightly. Jobs and Wozniak understood that selling shares to the public would bring scrutiny, pressure for quarterly profits, and demands from shareholders who might not share their vision. But the potential rewards were enormous. A successful stock offering would provide the resources to transform Apple from a fast-growing startup into a technology powerhouse. Throughout 1980, Apple prepared for its initial public offering with the help of investment bank Morgan Stanley. The company hired experienced executives, established formal business processes, and created detailed financial projections. They needed to convince investors that personal computers weren't just a fad, but represented a fundamental shift in how people would work and live. On December 12, 1980, Apple went public with one of the most successful stock offerings in history. The company sold 4.6 million shares at $22 each, raising over $100 million in a single day. The stock price immediately jumped, creating more millionaires than any company since Ford Motor Company went public decades earlier. Wozniak and Jobs, still in their 20s, suddenly found themselves worth hundreds of millions of dollars on paper. The IPO transformed Apple overnight. The influx of capital allowed the company to expand manufacturing, hire top engineering talent from competitors, and invest heavily in research and development. Apple opened new facilities, improved quality control processes, and began developing multiple product lines simultaneously. The company could now think beyond incremental improvements to the Apple II and pursue bold new concepts. Silicon Valley watched Apple's success with fascination. Other technology startups saw that enormous wealth could be created almost overnight if they could replicate Apple's formula of innovative products and rapid growth. Venture capital firms began pouring money into personal computer companies, software developers, and peripheral manufacturers. Apple's IPO helped create the modern technology investment ecosystem. With substantial resources now available, Apple began planning products that would have been impossible just months earlier. The company started ambitious projects that required teams of dozens of engineers and budgets that would have bankrupted the earlier Apple. The funding provided the confidence to compete directly with established technology companies and the resources to pursue revolutionary rather than evolutionary changes. This financial foundation would prove essential as Apple prepared to tackle its next challenge, creating computers that could bring advanced features like graphical interfaces to mainstream users. Part 4. Clash of Visions, the Lisa Project. Fresh from their successful IPO, Apple now had the resources to chase bigger dreams. Steve Jobs had become fascinated with the revolutionary work happening at Xerox's Palo Alto Research Center, where engineers were experimenting with something that seemed like science fiction: computers you could control by pointing and clicking instead of typing complex commands. In late 1979, Jobs arranged a visit to Xerox PARC that would change everything. What he saw there amazed him. Engineers demonstrated computers with windows, icons, and a small device called a mouse that could move a cursor around the screen. Instead of memorizing cryptic commands, users could simply point at what they wanted and click. This graphical interface made computers feel natural and intuitive. Jobs returned to Apple with a burning vision. He wanted to bring this revolutionary interface to regular people, not just research laboratories. Apple launched an ambitious project called Lisa, named after Jobs' daughter, though the company later claimed it stood for Local Integrated Software Architecture. The Lisa team worked tirelessly to recreate and improve upon what Xerox had started. The technical achievements were remarkable. Lisa featured multiple windows that could overlap like papers on a desk. Users could drag files between folders using the mouse. The computer had drop-down menus that appeared when needed and disappeared when not. These features seem basic today, but in 1983, they represented a complete revolution in how humans interacted with computers. However, Lisa faced serious problems from the start. The computer was incredibly expensive, costing nearly $10,000 when most personal computers sold for under $3,000. The sophisticated graphics required powerful processors that made Lisa slow and frustrating to use. The machine often crashed, losing users work without warning. More importantly, the market wasn't ready for Lisa's innovations. Most computer users in 1983 were comfortable with text-based commands and couldn't justify spending so much money for a pointing device and pretty pictures. Businesses saw Lisa as an expensive toy rather than a serious work tool. Sales were disappointing, and within 2 years, Apple quietly discontinued the project. Yet Lisa's failure taught Apple valuable lessons about timing, pricing, and market readiness. The technical innovations lived on, influencing every computer Apple would build afterward. The graphical interface concepts, the focus on user experience, and the belief that computers should be intuitive rather than intimidating became core principles that would guide Apple's future success. The Lisa project showed that revolutionary ideas sometimes arrive before the world is ready to accept them. Apple learned that innovation alone wasn't enough. They needed to balance ambitious vision with practical execution and market understanding. These hard-learned lessons would prove crucial as Apple prepared to tackle their next challenge: creating a computer that would bring graphical interfaces to the masses without Lisa's fatal flaws. Chapter 2. The Macintosh Gambit: Triumph, Downfall, and Exile. Part 1. The 1984 Moment. Macintosh launches a new era. The year 1984 would change everything. Apple stood at a crossroads, holding a machine that looked nothing like the bulky computers filling offices across America. The Macintosh sat compact and clean, its screen glowing with something revolutionary: pictures, windows, and folders that looked real enough to touch. Steve Jobs had watched people struggle with computers that spoke only in mysterious commands, typed the wrong letters, and the machine would spit back error messages that made no sense. The Macintosh offered something different: a mouse that let you point and click, just like reaching out to touch what you wanted. Windows opened and closed like file cabinets. Trash cans actually looked like trash cans. But first, the world had to see it. On January 22, 1984, during the Super Bowl, a commercial aired that would become legend. Ridley Scott, fresh from directing Blade Runner, created a dark vision of corporate conformity. Gray-suited workers sat mesmerized by a massive screen spouting propaganda. Then a woman in bright athletic wear burst through, hurling a sledgehammer that shattered the screen. The message was clear. Apple would free people from the dull, complicated world of business computing. 2 days later, Jobs walked onto a stage in Cupertino. He pulled the Macintosh from a bag like a magician revealing his greatest trick. The computer spoke, its electronic voice cutting through the silence. "Hello, I am Macintosh. It sure is great to get out of that bag." The audience erupted. Everything about the Mac felt different. Its all-in-one design meant no tangles of cables. The mouse fit naturally in your hand. Programs had menus that dropped down like window shades, showing options in plain English. You could cut and paste text as easily as using scissors and glue. For the first time, regular people could imagine having a computer at home. The creative world took notice immediately. Designers discovered they could create layouts on screen that matched what would print on paper. Artists found tools that let them paint with light instead of pigment. The Mac became a canvas, a printing press, and a design studio all in one. Yet reality had sharp edges. At $2,495, the Macintosh cost more than many cars. Its tiny black and white screen strained eyes. The single floppy disk drive meant constant disk swapping. Most importantly, software was scarce. While IBM-compatible computers ran thousands of programs, Mac users had dozens. Sales started strong but quickly stumbled. The Mac was brilliant but limited, revolutionary but expensive. It had shown the future of computing, but that future would have to wait. The machine that promised to change everything had planted seeds that would take years to grow, while Apple faced the harsh reality that being first doesn't always mean winning. Part 2. Innovation, Tension, and Power Struggles. The Macintosh had shown the world what computers could become, but inside Apple's walls, a different battle was brewing. As 1984 turned into 1985, the company faced a crisis that had nothing to do with technology and everything to do with people. Steve Jobs had always been demanding. He pushed his teams harder than anyone thought possible, often to the point of breaking. But now, as Apple's co-founder and the driving force behind the Mac, he found himself at odds with John Sculley, the CEO he had personally recruited from Pepsi, with the famous challenge. Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world? The honeymoon between Jobs and Sculley didn't last long. Jobs wanted to keep pushing boundaries, creating products that were beautiful and revolutionary, regardless of cost or market demands. Sculley, with his business background, saw the numbers differently. The Mac was struggling to find buyers beyond devoted Apple fans. The high price kept it out of reach for most consumers, while businesses stuck with cheaper IBM-compatible machines. These weren't just disagreements about strategy. They became personal fights that echoed through Apple's offices. Jobs would storm into meetings, dismiss ideas he didn't like, and make decisions without consulting anyone. Sculley tried to bring order and process to a company that had grown used to chaos. Each man believed he knew what was best for Apple's future. Meanwhile, Steve Wozniak, the technical genius who had co-founded Apple with Jobs, was quietly stepping back. The Woz had never enjoyed the corporate battles or the pressure that came with Apple's success. He wanted to tinker with technology and solve problems, not fight over quarterly reports and market share. His reduced involvement left Jobs increasingly isolated within the company he had helped create. The tension reached a breaking point in early 1985. Board meetings became battlegrounds. Employees chose sides, creating factions within the company. Some backed Jobs, believing his vision was essential to Apple's identity. Others supported Sculley, thinking the company needed professional management to survive. Jobs tried to rally support for his position, but he discovered that many of the people he had hired no longer believed in his leadership. The board, including some of his oldest allies, began to question whether Jobs could guide Apple through its current challenges. The very passion and stubbornness that had made Jobs successful were now seen as obstacles to Apple's growth. As spring arrived, it became clear that something had to give. Two strong leaders with completely different visions couldn't coexist in the same company. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reshape Apple's future and send one of its founders into exile, beginning a journey that would eventually bring him back as the company's savior. Part 3. Adobe and the Desktop Publishing Revolution. While tensions brewed in Apple's boardroom, something remarkable was happening that would quietly save the company's future. In the midst of all the fighting between Jobs and Scully, the Macintosh was about to find its perfect calling. The machine that seemed too expensive for ordinary computer users was about to become the essential tool for an entirely new kind of work. The breakthrough came through an unlikely partnership with a small company called Adobe Systems. Two former Xerox engineers, John Warnock and Chuck Geschke, had created something called PostScript. This was computer code that could describe exactly how text and images should look on a page. It sounds simple now, but at the time, getting computers to produce professional-looking documents was nearly impossible. Jobs immediately saw the potential. He convinced Adobe to make PostScript work with the Macintosh, and Apple invested in the young company. Then came the missing piece of the puzzle. Apple introduced the LaserWriter printer in 1985. This wasn't just any printer. It was the first affordable laser printer that could produce crisp, professional-quality pages. The combination was magical. A Macintosh connected to a LaserWriter could create documents that looked like they came from a professional printing shop. But the real revolution started when a company called Aldus released PageMaker software for the Macintosh. Suddenly, anyone could design newsletters, brochures, and magazines on their desktop. They could move text around, resize photos, and see exactly how the final page would look before printing it. What once required expensive typesetting equipment and specialized skills could now be done by a single person with a Mac. Publishers and designers rushed to buy Macintosh computers. Small businesses that could never afford professional printing services began creating their own marketing materials. Newspapers found they could cut costs by doing layout work in-house. The term desktop publishing was born, and the Macintosh owned this new market completely. This success created something powerful for Apple. While the company struggled to compete with cheaper IBM-compatible computers in offices and homes, it had found a niche where the Macintosh wasn't just useful, it was essential. Creative professionals needed the Mac's superior graphics capabilities and its seamless integration with professional printers and software. The desktop publishing revolution did more than just boost sales. It established Apple's reputation as the computer company for creative people. Art directors, graphic designers, and publishers began to see the Mac as their natural tool. This reputation would stick with Apple for decades, even through its darkest periods. As word spread through creative industries, the Macintosh gained a devoted following that would help sustain the company through the difficult years ahead. While Jobs and Scully continued their power struggle, Apple had accidentally discovered its true strength, serving the creative community that valued innovation over price. Part 4. The Great Ousting. Jobs leaves Apple. The creative community's embrace of the Macintosh should have been a moment of triumph for Steve Jobs. Instead, it became the backdrop for the most painful chapter of his career. By 1985, the tensions between Jobs and CEO John Scully had reached a breaking point. What started as a partnership between the visionary founder and the experienced executive had turned into an all-out war for control of Apple's future. Jobs believed Apple needed to stay true to its revolutionary spirit. He pushed for bold new products and refused to compromise on design, even if it meant higher costs. Scully, meanwhile, worried about profits and market share. He wanted Apple to become more like other computer companies, focusing on practical business needs rather than artistic vision. The board of directors found themselves caught between these two powerful personalities, each pulling the company in opposite directions. The final confrontation came during a board meeting in May 1985. Scully had quietly gathered support from key board members, arguing that Jobs was too unpredictable to lead Apple through its growing pains. When the votes were counted, Jobs found himself stripped of operational control over the company he had co-founded in his parents' garage just 9 years earlier. The man who had once declared that he wanted to put a computer in every home was suddenly powerless within his own creation. Jobs felt betrayed by people he had trusted. The creative fire that had built Apple into a technology giant now burned with anger and hurt. Rather than accept a ceremonial role, he made a decision that shocked Silicon Valley. In September 1985, Steve Jobs resigned from Apple, taking 5 key employees with him. His resignation letter was brief but pointed, criticizing the company's direction under Scully's leadership. The departure sent ripples through the entire technology industry. Here was the face of personal computing, the man who had made computers personal and accessible, walking away from his life's work. Apple's stock price barely moved, suggesting that Wall Street saw Jobs as more of a liability than an asset. Many industry observers predicted he would fade into obscurity, another Silicon Valley casualty who had burned too bright too fast. But Jobs had no intention of disappearing quietly. Within weeks of leaving Apple, he announced the formation of Next Computer, a new company that would build the ultimate computer for higher education and business users. He recruited top talent and secured millions in funding, determined to prove that his vision for computing was correct. Around the same time, he made another surprising move, purchasing the computer graphics division of Lucasfilm for $10 million. This small animation studio would eventually become Pixar. Apple, meanwhile, began to drift without its co-founder's driving force. Scully had won the battle for control, but the victory felt hollow as the company struggled to maintain its innovative edge in an increasingly competitive market. Chapter 3: Lost in the Wilderness. Innovation and Instability. Part 1: Searching for Identity, New Products and Mixed Results. After the devastating board coup that removed Steve Jobs from power, Apple found itself adrift in uncharted waters. The company that had once revolutionized personal computing now faced a daunting challenge, proving it could innovate and thrive without its visionary co-founder. The late 1980s brought Apple's first major stumble with the Apple III. Engineers had created what they believed was the natural successor to the successful Apple II, but reality proved harsh. The machine ran too hot, literally burning users' hands. Components failed regularly. Software crashed without warning. Customers who had trusted Apple felt betrayed. The Apple III became a costly lesson that innovation meant nothing without reliability. Despite this setback, Apple's engineers refused to abandon their ambitious dreams. They envisioned a future where computers would fit in briefcases and respond to handwritten notes. These weren't just wild fantasies. They represented Apple's desperate attempt to find its next breakthrough product. The PowerBook project emerged from this searching period as a genuine success story. Apple's designers created sleek, portable computers that business travelers actually wanted to carry. The PowerBook's revolutionary trackball sat in the center of the keyboard, making it intuitive to use on cramped airplane seats. Sales soared as professionals discovered they could finally work anywhere. This victory gave Apple hope that it still possessed the magic touch for creating desirable products. But success with the PowerBook couldn't mask other painful failures. The Newton Personal Digital Assistant represented Apple's boldest gamble yet. Engineers promised a device that would recognize handwriting and organize daily life. Marketing campaigns showed busy executives scribbling notes that magically transformed into typed text. The reality disappointed everyone. The Newton's handwriting recognition was comically bad, turning simple words into gibberish. Users grew frustrated trying to make the device understand their writing. The technology simply wasn't ready for real-world use. The Newton's failure stung particularly deeply because Apple had invested enormous resources and reputation in the project. Industry observers began questioning whether Apple could succeed without Jobs' guidance. Stock prices reflected this growing doubt as investors watched competitors gain ground with simpler, more reliable products. Each new product launched during this period felt like a desperate throw of the dice. Apple tried everything from gaming systems to business servers, searching for the next category-defining hit. Some products showed promise but arrived too early for mass adoption. Others solved problems that customers didn't yet know they had. The company's scattered approach revealed an organization lacking clear direction and confident leadership. These mixed results created a troubling pattern. Apple could still produce genuinely innovative products like the PowerBook, proving its engineering talent remained strong. But for every success, costly failures like the Newton reminded everyone that innovation without proper execution and timing meant little in the marketplace. The company stood at a crossroads, desperately needing steady leadership to guide its considerable talents towards sustainable success. Part 2. Leadership Roulette and Strategic Stumbles. John Sculley had won the battle against Steve Jobs, but victory brought unexpected burdens. As CEO, he faced the daunting task of proving that Apple could thrive without its visionary founder. Sculley brought impressive credentials from PepsiCo, where he had mastered the art of consumer marketing. He believed Apple needed professional management and systematic planning rather than the chaotic genius that had defined its early years. Under Sculley's leadership, Apple initially flourished. The Macintosh found its footing in desktop publishing and education markets. Revenue climbed steadily, and the company appeared to validate the board's decision to choose stability over innovation. Sculley expanded Apple's product line methodically, introducing new computer models and exploring emerging technologies. His marketing background helped position Apple as a premium brand for creative professionals. But the technology landscape shifted beneath Apple's feet. Microsoft's Windows began closing the gap with the Macintosh interface, while PC manufacturers drove down hardware costs through fierce competition. Apple's closed system, once its greatest strength, became a liability as customers gravitated toward cheaper alternatives. Sculley struggled to respond effectively, caught between maintaining Apple's premium positioning and competing on price. The pressure mounted as Apple's market share eroded. Internal tensions grew as different divisions pursued conflicting strategies. Sculley found himself fighting battles on multiple fronts, defending against Microsoft's advances while managing increasingly restless shareholders and employees. His corporate background, initially seen as an asset, began working against him as Apple's culture rejected traditional business practices. In 1993, the board replaced Sculley with Michael Spindler, a German engineer who had risen through Apple's European operations. Spindler brought technical expertise but lacked the charisma needed to rally Apple's demoralized workforce. He attempted to license the Mac operating system to other manufacturers, a radical departure from Apple's integrated approach. The strategy backfired, creating confusion in the marketplace while failing to generate significant revenue. Spindler's tenure proved brief and turbulent. Apple's financial situation deteriorated rapidly as Windows PCs dominated the market. The company missed critical technology transitions and watched helplessly as its once commanding lead in user interface design evaporated. By 1996, Apple appeared headed for bankruptcy, its stock price plummeting to historic lows. The board made another desperate move, installing Gil Amelio as CEO. Amelio, a veteran semiconductor executive, promised to restore Apple's financial health through aggressive cost-cutting and strategic focus. He eliminated redundant products and streamlined operations, but his efforts felt like rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship. Apple still lacked a compelling vision for the future. Each leadership change brought new strategies and fresh promises, but the fundamental problems persisted. Apple had lost its way, trapped between its premium heritage and market realities. The company that had once defined personal computing now struggled to remain relevant. Something dramatic needed to happen, or Apple would become another cautionary tale about innovation without execution. Part 3. Mac clones and the threat of irrelevance. In 1994, Apple made a decision that seemed logical at the time, but would nearly destroy everything the company stood for. Facing dwindling market share and desperate to compete with the flood of cheap Windows computers, Apple executives decided to license their Mac operating system to other manufacturers. For the first time in company history, customers could buy a Macintosh computer that wasn't made by Apple. The clone makers jumped at the opportunity. Companies like Power Computing, Umax, and Motorola began producing machines that ran Mac OS but cost hundreds of dollars less than genuine Apple computers. These clones looked different from Apple's sleek designs, often housed in generic beige towers that resembled typical PC cases. But inside, they ran the same software that made Macs special. Apple's leadership believed this strategy would expand their user base and generate revenue through licensing fees. They watched as Microsoft had grown dominant by licensing Windows to countless PC manufacturers. If it worked for Microsoft, why not for Apple? The company desperately needed cash, and licensing seemed like easy money. The plan backfired spectacularly. Instead of attracting new customers to the Mac platform, the clones simply stole sales from Apple's own computers. Why would someone pay premium prices for an Apple machine when they could get the same experience for much less? Power computing's machines were not only cheaper but often faster than Apple's offerings, making the choice obvious for cost-conscious buyers. The clone manufacturers focused on speed and price, leaving Apple to compete on design and brand recognition alone. But Apple's financial troubles meant they couldn't invest heavily in making their computers significantly better than the clones. The company found itself trapped in a race to the bottom, competing with partners who used Apple's own technology against them. Sales of genuine Apple computers plummeted. The company that had built its reputation on premium, integrated hardware and software now watched as others commoditized their platform. Each clone sold meant lost revenue for Apple, which still had to maintain expensive research and development, manufacturing facilities, and retail operations. The licensing experiment revealed a fundamental truth about Apple's business model. Unlike Microsoft, which profited from software licensing, Apple's strength lay in controlling the entire user experience. When that control vanished, so did Apple's competitive advantage. The clones offered Mac compatibility without Mac quality, undermining everything Apple represented. By 1997, the situation had become untenable. Apple was bleeding money and market share simultaneously. The clone strategy, born from desperation, had accelerated the company's decline rather than reversing it. Apple needed to choose between becoming a software company like Microsoft or returning to its roots as an integrated hardware and software manufacturer. The clone experiment taught Apple a painful lesson about its own identity. The company's value wasn't just in its operating system, but in how that software worked seamlessly with carefully designed hardware. This realization would prove crucial as Apple prepared for its next chapter, one that would require decisive action to reclaim control of its destiny. Part 4. Next Purchase. The Prodigal Son Returns. By late 1996, Apple was a company gasping for air. The Mac clone experiment had backfired spectacularly, and Gil Amelio, the latest CEO in a parade of failed leaders, knew the company needed a miracle. The aging Mac OS was crumbling under its own weight, and competitors like Microsoft were racing ahead with more modern systems. Apple had tried to build a next-generation operating system called Copeland, but after years of development and millions of dollars, the project had collapsed in spectacular failure. Desperate for a solution, Amelio began looking for a modern operating system Apple could actually use. Several options emerged, but one caught everyone's attention. A small company called Next, founded by none other than Steve Jobs after his ouster from Apple 11 years earlier, had built exactly what Apple needed. Next's operating system was elegant, powerful, and years ahead of anything else on the market. The irony was impossible to ignore. Apple's salvation might come from the very man they had pushed out in 1985. Jobs had spent over a decade in exile, building Next into a company that created beautiful computers and groundbreaking software. Though Next had never achieved commercial success, its technology was undeniably superior to Apple's aging systems. Negotiations began in earnest. Apple needed Next's operating system, but acquiring it meant bringing Jobs back into the company he had co-founded in his garage 20 years earlier. Some Apple executives worried about what would happen when the famously demanding and perfectionist Jobs returned to a company he once claimed had lost its way. On December 20th, 1996, Apple announced it would acquire Next for $429 million. The deal brought not just advanced technology, but also a team of brilliant engineers and, most significantly, Steve Jobs himself. He would serve as an advisor to Amelio, though many suspected he had bigger plans. The integration process revealed just how far Apple had fallen. Next's small team had created software that outperformed Apple's much larger engineering efforts. Jobs watched as his former company struggled with basic decisions about product direction and strategy. It became clear that Apple's problems went far deeper than just needing better software. Within months, Jobs began asserting more influence over Apple's direction. He questioned product lines, challenged marketing strategies, and pushed for the kind of focus and simplicity that had once made Apple great. The Next acquisition had given Apple new technology, but it also planted the seeds for a much more fundamental transformation. By July 1997, Emilio was out, and the board asked Jobs to serve as interim CEO. The prodigal son had returned, bringing with him not just the technical foundation Apple desperately needed, but also the vision and leadership that would transform the dying company into something entirely new. Chapter 4: The Renaissance, Reinvention and the iMac Miracle. Part 1: Jobs reclaims the throne. Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997 like a general surveying a battlefield littered with casualties. The company that had once changed the world was drowning in a sea of confusing products and dwindling cash reserves. Within weeks of becoming interim CEO, Jobs made his first shocking move. He walked into a boardroom and declared that Apple would kill almost everything it was making. The product lineup that greeted Jobs was a nightmare of complexity. Apple was producing desktop computers, laptops, printers, cameras, and dozens of variations that confused customers and drained resources. Jobs grabbed a marker and drew a simple grid on a whiteboard. 4 squares, desktop and portable, consumer and professional. Everything else would disappear. Engineers and executives watched in stunned silence as Jobs methodically eliminated product after product. The Newton handheld computer, despite years of development, was scrapped immediately. Printers vanished from the roadmap. Countless computer models that differed only in minor specifications were consolidated or canceled entirely. The man who had been forced out of his own company was now ruthlessly cutting away everything he saw as unnecessary fat. But Jobs' most controversial decision came in August 1997 at the Macworld Conference in Boston. As he stood on stage, the crowd erupted in boos when Microsoft's Bill Gates appeared on the giant screen via satellite. Jobs had struck a deal with Apple's former enemy. Microsoft would invest $150 million in Apple and continue developing Office software for Mac computers. In return, Apple would make Internet Explorer the default web browser and drop patent lawsuits against Microsoft. The audience felt betrayed, but Jobs understood what they could not see. Apple needed breathing room to survive. The Microsoft partnership provided immediate cash flow and ensured that Mac users could still access essential business software. Without this lifeline, Apple might not have lasted another year. Jobs then began reshaping Apple's culture with the same intensity he applied to products. He eliminated layers of middle management and demanded that teams report directly to him. Every Wednesday, he held 3-hour meetings where department heads had to justify their projects. If something didn't excite him or serve a clear purpose, it was gone. The transformation was brutal but necessary. By early 1998, Apple had reduced its product line from dozens of confusing options to just 4 main categories. The company's focus had crystallized around a simple philosophy that Jobs preached relentlessly: make fewer things, but make them perfect. Employees either thrived under Jobs' demanding leadership or quickly left the company. Those who stayed discovered that working for Apple meant participating in something special. Jobs had returned not just as a CEO, but as the keeper of Apple's original vision. The stage was now set for the company's most important product launch in years. Part 2: The iMac Phenomenon. The world changed on May 6, 1998, when Steve Jobs walked onto a stage at Apple's Cupertino headquarters. Behind him sat something that looked nothing like any computer anyone had seen before. The translucent Bondi blue iMac gleamed under the stage lights, its egg-shaped design challenging every assumption about what a computer should look like. For years, computers had been beige boxes that people hid under their desks. They came with tangled cables, confusing setup instructions, and designs that screamed technology for experts only. Jobs had studied this problem carefully. He watched frustrated customers struggle with installation processes that required technical degrees. He saw families intimidated by machines that looked more like industrial equipment than household appliances. The iMac solved these problems with radical simplicity. Everything needed to get online was built inside that colorful shell. No separate monitor, no tower, no maze of cables connecting different components. Users could literally take it out of the box, plug it into the wall, and start using the internet within minutes. The computer even came with a handle, making it as portable as a television set. But the real revolution was the design itself. Jonathan Ive, Apple's design chief, had created something that people actually wanted to display in their homes. The translucent case revealed the internal components like a window into the machine's soul. The Bondi blue color was warm and inviting, borrowed from surfboards rather than corporate boardrooms. Suddenly, owning a computer became a statement about style and personality. Apple's marketing campaign amplified this message with the simple slogan, "Think different." Television commercials showed the iMac as the computer for creative people, students, and families who wanted technology that enhanced their lives rather than complicated them. The company positioned the iMac as the anti-PC, a machine that celebrated individuality in a world of conformity. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. On the first day of sales, Apple sold 278,000 iMacs, making it the fastest-selling computer in the company's history. Stores across America reported lines of customers waiting to see the machine in person. Many buyers were first-time computer owners, drawn by the iMac's approachable design and straightforward functionality. Wall Street took notice immediately. Apple's stock price climbed steadily as sales reports exceeded every expectation. Investors who had written off the company just months earlier suddenly saw Apple as an innovation leader again. The iMac proved that consumers would pay premium prices for superior design and user experience. More importantly, the iMac expanded Apple's customer base beyond its traditional core of graphic designers and educators. Families bought iMacs for their children. College students chose them over cheaper alternatives because they looked cool in dorm rooms. Creative professionals who had fled to Windows during Apple's dark years began returning. The success restored something invaluable that Apple had lost during its wilderness years: confidence. Employees walked taller, knowing they worked for a company that could still surprise the world. Retail partners who had relegated Apple products to dusty corners gave them prominent display space again. The technology press, which had written Apple's obituary multiple times, now scrambled to understand how the company had achieved such a dramatic turnaround. The iMac proved that Apple's original vision remained powerful and relevant. By combining beautiful design with intuitive functionality, the company had created more than just a successful product. They had established a template for everything that would follow. Part 3. Digital Hub Strategy and Creative Tools. The iMac's success gave Steve Jobs and his team something invaluable: breathing room to think bigger. By early 2000, Apple had proven it could make beautiful computers that people actually wanted to buy. But Jobs saw an opportunity that went far beyond selling machines. He noticed how digital cameras, music players, and video equipment were becoming cheaper and more popular. Most people owned these devices, but struggled to make them work together smoothly. Jobs realized that personal computers could become the command center for all these digital gadgets. Instead of treating the Mac as just another computer, Apple would position it as the heart of what they called the digital hub. This wasn't just marketing speak. Jobs genuinely believed that people wanted to create movies, organize photos, and manage music collections on their computers. But existing software made these tasks frustrating and complicated. The first piece of this puzzle came with iMovie, launched in 1999. Before iMovie, editing home videos required expensive professional equipment and technical expertise. Apple's software let anyone drag and drop video clips to create polished movies with titles, transitions, and soundtracks. Parents could turn birthday parties into mini documentaries. Students could produce school projects that looked professionally made. The software came free with every new Mac, making video editing accessible to millions of regular users. iTunes followed in 2001, transforming how people managed their music collections. The software could import songs from CDs, organize them into playlists, and burn custom CDs with just a few clicks. iTunes made the Mac the perfect companion for the growing number of people who wanted to move beyond traditional stereo systems. Users could create workout mixes, party playlists, or romantic compilations without the hassle of switching physical CDs. iPhoto completed the creative trilogy in 2002, solving the chaos of digital photography. As digital cameras became affordable, people found themselves with hundreds of photos scattered across their hard drives. iPhoto automatically organized pictures by date, let users create albums for special events, and offered simple editing tools to fix red eyes or adjust brightness. The software could even order professional prints online or create photo books that rivaled expensive custom albums. These applications worked beautifully together and with the Mac's elegant interface. A user could import vacation photos in iPhoto, add them to a movie in iMovie, and set the whole production to music managed in iTunes. The process felt natural and intuitive, exactly what Jobs had envisioned when he returned to Apple. The digital hub strategy did more than sell computers. It changed how people thought about technology in their daily lives. Apple was no longer just a computer company competing with Dell and IBM. They were creating tools that helped ordinary people become creators, storytellers, and artists. This vision would soon extend beyond the Mac itself, setting the stage for devices that would make Apple the most valuable company in the world. Part 4. Power Mac, iBook, and OS X, Forging a New Identity. The digital hub strategy had given Apple a clear mission, but the company needed more than creative software to compete in the professional market. In late 1999, Jobs introduced the Power Mac G4, a sleek tower that looked nothing like the beige boxes dominating corporate offices. The machine featured a translucent case and raw computing power that could handle video editing and graphic design with ease. Apple marketed it boldly, claiming the G4 was so fast that the government classified it as a supercomputer and restricted its export to certain countries. While the Power Mac targeted professionals, Apple recognized that students and casual users needed something different. The iBook launched in 1999 as a colorful, clamshell-shaped laptop that borrowed the iMac's friendly design language. Available in bright colors like tangerine and blueberry, the iBook made portable computing feel approachable rather than intimidating. Its built-in wireless capability was revolutionary at the time, allowing users to connect to the internet without cables from anywhere in their home or office. Behind these hardware advances, Apple was working on something even more significant. The old Mac operating system, which had served the company for over a decade, was showing its age. It crashed frequently and struggled with modern computing demands. Jobs knew that Next's operating system technology, which Apple had acquired when they bought his company, held the key to solving these problems. In March 2001, Apple released Mac OS X, pronounced Mac OS X. The new system looked completely different from anything Mac users had seen before. It featured a dock at the bottom of the screen where applications bounced playfully when clicked. Windows had subtle shadows and transparency effects that made the interface feel three-dimensional. Most importantly, the system rarely crashed because it was built on a rock-solid foundation borrowed from Unix. The transition wasn't easy for existing Mac users. Many complained that their favorite programs didn't work with the new system, and some features felt unfamiliar. But OS X offered something the old system couldn't: true multitasking without fear of one misbehaving program bringing down the entire computer. Video editors could render footage while checking email and browsing the web simultaneously. The combination of powerful hardware and stable software began attracting new customers to Apple. Creative professionals who had abandoned the Mac during its dark years started returning. The Power Mac G4 running OS X could handle tasks that would crash Windows machines, while the iBook offered students a reliable and stylish alternative to boring corporate laptops. These developments represented more than technical improvements. Apple was crafting a distinct identity that separated it from every other computer company. While competitors focused on specifications and price, Apple emphasized the complete user experience. The translucent cases, bouncing icons, and intuitive interfaces suggested that technology could be both powerful and delightful. This philosophy would soon extend beyond computers entirely, as Apple prepared to enter markets that would transform the company from a niche player into a global phenomenon. Chapter 5: Legacy and Influence, From Macs to the Future. Part 1: The Mac as Cultural Icon. Something remarkable began to happen in the late 1980s and early 1990s. The Macintosh, which had started as simply another computer, began transforming into something much larger. Artists discovered they could create stunning graphics with programs like Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. Musicians found they could compose entire symphonies using MIDI software. Writers and publishers realized they could design professional-looking documents without expensive typesetting equipment. The transformation wasn't accidental. Apple had made deliberate choices that attracted creative people. The Mac's superior graphics capabilities, intuitive interface, and built-in networking made it perfect for design studios, advertising agencies, and print shops. When desktop publishing emerged, the Mac became the tool of choice for people who cared about how things looked on the page. Schools embraced the Mac too. Teachers found students could learn faster when technology felt approachable rather than intimidating. The colorful iMacs that arrived in 1998 looked friendly and inviting, nothing like the beige boxes that dominated most offices. Parents began associating Apple computers with education and creativity, not just business productivity. Apple's marketing reinforced these connections brilliantly. The Think Different campaign celebrated rebels, artists, and innovators. Apple positioned Mac users as creative individuals who refused to accept the ordinary. This wasn't just advertising strategy. It reflected a genuine culture that had grown around the product. Creative professionals became Apple's most passionate advocates. Graphic designers would defend their Macs with religious fervor. Film editors swore by Final Cut Pro. Musicians treasured their Logic Pro setups. These weren't just tools to them. They were extensions of their artistic identity. The loyalty ran deeper than mere preference. Mac users felt they belonged to something special, a community that valued design, creativity, and thinking differently. They wore their choice like a badge of honor. Using a Mac meant you understood that technology should be beautiful, not just functional. This cultural positioning created powerful business advantages. When creative professionals succeeded using Macs, they influenced entire industries. Advertising agencies standardized on Macs, then convinced their clients to do the same. Design schools taught on Macs, training the next generation to prefer Apple products. Movie studios used Macs for post-production, making them essential tools in Hollywood. The phenomenon extended beyond professional use. Families began choosing Macs because they seemed more suitable for children's education and creative activities. Coffee shops discovered that customers with MacBooks projected the right image for their establishments. The glowing Apple logo became a status symbol that communicated taste and sophistication. By the early 2000s, Apple had achieved something unprecedented in the computer industry. They had transformed a product category into a lifestyle choice. The Mac wasn't just competing on technical specifications anymore. It represented values, aspirations, and identity. This cultural foundation would prove invaluable as Apple prepared to expand beyond computers into entirely new territories. Part 2: The Halo Effect, Devices Beyond the Mac. The cultural foundation Apple built with the Mac gave the company something precious: trust. People believed Apple could create products that would improve their lives. This trust became the launching pad for an extraordinary expansion that would transform Apple from a computer company into something much larger. In 2001, Apple released the iPod, a small white device that could hold thousands of songs. The iPod carried the Mac's design DNA: simple, elegant, and focused on the user experience. Like the Mac, it made complex technology feel effortless. Users could navigate their entire music collection with a circular scroll wheel that felt natural and satisfying to use. The iPod succeeded because Apple understood something others missed. People didn't just want to store music. They wanted to carry their entire musical identity with them. The device's clean white earbuds became as recognizable as the glowing Apple logo on MacBooks. Soon, subway cars and college campuses filled with people wearing these distinctive white headphones. But the iPod did more than play music. It taught Apple how to create desire for products people didn't know they needed. The company applied lessons learned from Mac marketing, positioning the iPod not as a technical gadget, but as a lifestyle accessory. The advertising campaigns were simple yet powerful, showing dancing silhouettes against bright colors, making music feel joyful and personal. The success gave Apple confidence to attempt something even more ambitious. In 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage and announced the iPhone. This device combined the Mac's intuitive interface with a phone, iPod, and internet browser. The iPhone's touchscreen responded to gestures that felt natural, just like clicking a mouse on the Mac had felt revolutionary decades earlier. The iPhone changed everything. Suddenly, people carried powerful computers in their pockets. They could check email, browse websites, take photos, and listen to music using a single device. The iPhone made smartphones accessible to everyone, not just business professionals who had struggled with complicated BlackBerry keyboards. 3 years later, Apple introduced the iPad, creating an entirely new category between phones and laptops. The iPad brought the Mac's creative potential to a touchscreen format. Artists could draw directly on the screen, students could take notes by writing with their fingers, and families could share photos by passing the device around the dinner table. Each new device strengthened the others. iPhone users discovered they could sync their music from their Macs. iPad owners found their documents automatically appeared across all their devices. This ecosystem approach, where products worked better together than individually, became Apple's greatest competitive advantage. The company had learned that great technology wasn't about specifications or features. It was about understanding how people actually lived and worked. Each device solved real problems while maintaining the elegant simplicity that had made the Mac special. This integrated approach would define Apple's future and establish the template for how technology companies could create lasting customer relationships. Part 3. Leadership change and sustained innovation. By 2008, Steve Jobs faced a personal battle that would test everything Apple had built. His health was declining, though few outside the company knew the full extent of his pancreatic cancer. Jobs had always been the driving force behind every product decision, every design choice, every marketing campaign. The question that haunted Apple's boardroom was simple. Could the company survive without its visionary leader? Jobs knew this question too. In quiet moments between product launches and board meetings, he began preparing Apple for a future he might not see. He had watched other companies crumble when their founders departed. He was determined Apple would be different. The company's design philosophy and operational excellence had to become bigger than any single person, even himself. Tim Cook had been Jobs' right hand since 1998, managing operations with methodical precision while Jobs focused on products. Cook understood supply chains, manufacturing, and global markets in ways that complemented Jobs' intuitive grasp of consumer desires. When Jobs took his first medical leave in 2009, Cook stepped in seamlessly. The company continued shipping products on schedule, meeting financial targets, and maintaining the quality standards Jobs demanded. But health battles are unpredictable. Jobs returned, determined to complete his most ambitious projects. The iPad launched in 2010, creating an entirely new product category. He pushed his teams to perfect the iPhone 4 with its revolutionary Retina display. Each product felt like a message to the world that Apple's innovation engine was unstoppable, regardless of his personal struggles. Behind the scenes, Jobs was doing something unprecedented for a control-focused leader. He was teaching. Long sessions with Cook and other executives weren't just about quarterly results or product roadmaps. Jobs shared his decision-making process, his instincts about what customers wanted before they knew it themselves, his belief that great products required saying no to good ideas. When Jobs passed in October 2011, the technology world held its breath. Apple's stock price reflected investor uncertainty. Could Cook, an operations expert, maintain the creative magic that made Apple special? The answer came through steady leadership rather than dramatic gestures. Cook didn't try to become Jobs. Instead, he amplified what Jobs had built while adding his own strengths. Under Cook's leadership, Apple expanded globally, doubled down on environmental responsibility, and continued launching groundbreaking products. The Apple Watch, launched in 2015, showed that innovation didn't die with Jobs. The company's services business grew from a side project to a major revenue source. Cook faced challenges Jobs never imagined: privacy battles with governments, supply chain disruptions, and intense scrutiny of technology's social impact. His methodical approach and values-driven leadership style proved that Apple could evolve while staying true to its core mission of creating technology that enriched people's lives. The transition revealed something profound about what Jobs had really built. Apple wasn't just a company dependent on one brilliant mind. It was an institution with deeply embedded principles that could adapt and thrive across generations of leadership. Part 4. The Mac's Enduring DNA. Something remarkable happened at Apple in 2020 that most people didn't see coming. The company announced it would abandon Intel processors and create its own computer chips. This wasn't just a technical decision. It was Apple returning to its deepest beliefs about what computers should be. The M1 chip represented everything Apple had learned since 1984. Just like the original Mac broke free from IBM's dominance, Apple Silicon freed the Mac from depending on another company's roadmap. Engineers had spent years studying how people actually used their computers. They noticed something important. Most tasks happened in short bursts, not constant heavy lifting. Traditional laptop chips ran hot and drained batteries quickly. Apple's solution was different. The M1 chip borrowed ideas from iPhone processors, which had mastered efficiency through years of battery-powered computing. The result shocked even Apple's own engineers. MacBooks suddenly ran twice as long on a single charge while performing faster than many desktop computers. This technical achievement revealed something deeper about Apple's approach. While other companies chased raw speed, Apple focused on the complete experience. The M1 chip wasn't just faster. It made MacBooks silent, eliminated fan noise, and allowed the same software to run on phones, tablets, and computers. The software side proved equally important. macOS evolved to feel more like iOS, but without losing the power that creative professionals demanded. Features flowed between devices naturally. Start an email on your iPhone, finish it on your Mac. Copy text on your iPad, paste it on your MacBook. These connections felt magical to users, but they required years of careful engineering. Apple also maintained the Mac's visual identity while updating everything underneath. The design language that started with translucent plastics in 1998 evolved into sleek aluminum and glass. Each generation looked unmistakably like a Mac, even as the technology inside transformed completely. Professional users noticed something significant. Video editors could work with multiple 4K streams without the computer struggling. Music producers created complex arrangements without audio dropouts. Software developers compiled code faster than ever before. The Mac had kept its promise to creative professionals while becoming accessible to everyone else. This transformation highlighted Apple's unique position in technology. Most companies either focused on business users or consumers. Apple served both by refusing to compromise on quality. A MacBook Air powerful enough for casual users could also handle serious creative work when needed. The Mac's DNA had proven remarkably adaptable. The same principles that made the 1984 Macintosh revolutionary continued driving innovation 40 years later. User-friendly design, integration between hardware and software, and obsessive attention to details remained constant, even as everything else changed. This evolution set the stage for Apple's broader influence on technology and society, where these same principles would reshape entire industries far beyond personal computers. Part 5. Apple's Impact on Technology and Society. Apple's influence extends far beyond selling computers and phones. The company fundamentally changed how people think about technology itself. Before Apple, most tech companies built products for engineers and business professionals. Apple proved that ordinary people wanted beautiful, easy-to-use devices that worked seamlessly together. This shift in thinking spread throughout Silicon Valley and beyond. Suddenly, every tech company started hiring designers and talking about user experience. The clean, minimalist aesthetic that Apple popularized became the new standard. Companies that once focused purely on technical specifications began emphasizing how their products looked and felt. Apple's ecosystem approach created a new business model that others rushed to copy. The idea that phones, computers, tablets, and services should work together as one unified system seemed obvious once Apple demonstrated it. Google developed its own ecosystem around Android and Chrome. Microsoft rebuilt Windows around cloud services. Amazon created Alexa-powered smart homes. Each company learned from Apple that controlling the entire experience gave them more power and profit. The App Store changed software forever. Before 2008, installing programs on computers required technical knowledge and trust in unknown developers. Apple created a simple marketplace where anyone could download apps with one tap. This democratized software creation, allowing individual developers to reach millions of customers instantly. The subscription model that now dominates digital services began here, as developers found steady revenue streams through app sales. Apple's design philosophy influenced industries far beyond technology. Car manufacturers started emphasizing sleek interfaces and minimal buttons. Home appliance makers began creating products that looked more like Apple devices. Even architecture and furniture design adopted Apple's clean lines and premium materials. The company proved that good design wasn't just decoration, but a competitive advantage. Privacy became a marketing tool because of Apple's stance on user data. While other companies built business models around collecting personal information, Apple positioned privacy as a luxury feature. This forced competitors to respond, leading to stronger privacy laws worldwide and changing how all companies handle user data. The company's product launches transformed marketing itself. Apple's carefully choreographed events became entertainment, with millions watching executives present new features. Every detail was planned to create excitement and desire. Other companies copied this approach, turning product announcements into major media events. Apple's influence on work culture spread beyond tech companies. The emphasis on perfectionism, attention to detail, and thinking differently became mantras across industries. Universities began teaching design thinking as a core business skill. Startups worldwide adopted Apple's flat organizational structures and open office designs. Perhaps most significantly, Apple changed what people expect from technology. Devices should work immediately without instruction manuals. Updates should happen automatically. Different products should share information effortlessly. These expectations, once revolutionary, are now basic requirements that shape every new product development. Today's digital world bears Apple's fingerprints everywhere. From the touchscreens we take for granted to the app-based economy that employs millions, Apple's vision of intuitive, integrated technology became reality for billions of people worldwide.